My name's Jack, and just my evolution's kind of interesting in the sense that was a pagan until I was 21 and became a teacher. I ultimately led a Christian school that had a very large preschool, and up in Hesperia, did that for about 10 years. And the amazing story about that, because of my connection to Tom Mercer, we had about 9 or 10 senior pastors' kids in our school. And so there was a guy named Jack Rance, if you're old enough, you might remember that name, was the pastor of High Desert Baptist Church. And he was leaving to go up to Henderson. And so I called my friend, Tom Mercer, who was down at Foothill Baptist at that time down there, and down in the kind of the upland area. And I said, Tom, would you ever consider prostituting, that's the word I used, prostituting yourself and coming to an American Baptist church? And he said he would. He had no standards. And so I had him come up and speak at we had a K through 12 school. We had about 210 high school kids, so he would often come up and speak at our chapels. So I had him come up, and I had the pulpit committee from High Desert Baptist come and listen to Tom at our school, and that was in November of 1983, and then in February of '84 they extended a call to Tom to come. So he'll be 35 years this month in February, and so anyway, in May of that year, Tom and I met at a very famous restaurant to both of us. That was at Del Taco in Hesperia, and we talked about me leaving the school and coming to this little church of 125 or 150 people. And so that summer, that was a very hard decision for me, honestly. I prayed about it that summer. And the worst time somebody that's in running a school to leave, honestly, is in the summer. Because that's when, you're hiring staff and you're ordering supplies and everything. So I said to my board at the school, I'd like to stay through September and October, and then I'm leaving. And so I really felt the Lord kind of called me to go to this little church in Victorville. And that was in the end of October of '84. So Tom and I, this year, will have been together for 35 years. Wow. It's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, to give you context,
huh?
I turned 35 this year.
Oh, is that right? I was there for your birth.
Born.
Yeah, well, that's, honestly, Ken, that's pretty true for our staff. About 2/3 of them weren't even born when we started working together. But and then about 3 years ago, I went half-time. And so honestly, that's given me a lot of time to run around and do other things, and not so much like Mark. And I don't, all he does is surf. But I've been helping other churches. Got involved at a request to be the part-time chief of staff at a church in Indian Wells, Southwest. And I worked out there for 2 years and 4 months, and they were very gracious to me, and we hired kind of a person to take my place back in October, so I stepped out of that, and I just got brought into a new situation 2 weeks ago. Some of you might remember a guy that was on our staff for 9 years, Jeremy McGarity, answered a call to be the new senior pastor at Skyline Wesleyan down in San Diego. And so now I'm working down there several days a month helping him in transition. They have some challenges there, and we all deal with boards and elders or administrative boards, whatever polity you guys have. They have 17. And I told Jeremy, I said, that's going to be kind of a cold day in hell when you get 17 people to agree on where they're going to go to lunch. You know what I mean? And so he's now meeting with each one of them individually, all 17 of them. But, we kind of need to, I honestly believe that you should have some rotation off boards, and I know some hold differently and have different views about, if a person's a leader, an elder, whatever, they're on there for life. But I just kind of get nervous about that. But anyway, so now I'm with Jeremy down there, so that's been kind of fun to be involved in that a little bit, because we're merging 7 San Diego with Skyline, so it will be a multi-site campus arrangement that we'll be working on down there. But anyway, that's kind of a little bit of background. Let's just start into this, and we can let's look at that first one. What percentage of budget is wise to spend on compensation? Obviously, that will vary depending upon the size of the church budget. And James gave me this question. James, I wasn't sure what you put there when you said 300 dash or, 650.
Adult attendance.
Okay, so the attendance is 300 and that. Let me give you my thoughts on that. When you talk to other executive pastors or senior associate pastors or even senior pastors about this subject, you're going to get a lot of conversation. What I have generally heard, the budget shouldn't be any more than 55 to 60% of your total budget for personnel costs. So when you think in your own mind now, think of your own budget. I don't know if you would know off the top of your head what your personnel costs. And I think it gets a little irrelevant, Matt, for you and James and Scott that have preschools. We've got to eliminate that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you got to eliminate that and just talk about our church budget without the personnel staff costs related to the preschool. This can be a little bit phony. I've met some executive pastors that are real almost bean counter CPA kind of guys, and they'll set this standard at 55% or something and say we're never going to exceed that. I think that gets a little screwy, and I'll tell you why. One reason is debt load. And so let's say we have huge debt. Well, if I have huge debt and I'm paying that out of the general fund, what does that do to my percentage? It reduces it. The other thing, I don't know if some of you do this, but some churches actually have their missions budget outside their general fund. Does anybody do that here? They'll have a special, maybe, I know in some Wesleyan churches they do that, like in May and June. They collect a special offering for 2 months or something like that, and all that money goes into a fund, and that fund sets separately as a designated fund for their missionary support. Other churches do that too, so that would kind of skew that number as well, depending on what they do with their debt or their missions giving. Does anybody else here have any other funds that are not part of their general fund? That are outside, like missions or debt, debt would probably be part of that general fund. Okay. I thought you might be interested in seeing this. This was done by, I used to hang around with a bunch. I was the only non-executive pastor that was invited to the Restoration Movement Executive Pastors Group. Yeah, so it was, they were working on it. I know. I'm not familiar. If you're not familiar with the Restoration Movement, that's a movement that came out of the Church of Christ. And so, Church of Christ has no musical instruments and baptismal regeneration. Well, then the new group and they're Christian churches. We're all Christian churches, but they usually have Christian church in their name. Yeah. So it would be like Crossroads Christian. What's Gene Apple's called? Eastside Christian, Christ Church of the Valley down the street. Yeah, down the road here. Those are Christian churches. And I got this from those guys. They were guys that are executive pastors in, I think, Christian churches that were over 1,000. But this was their formula. And I thought it'd be kind of fun for you to see it. Average weekend attendance divided by the number of full-time employees. So you have full-time staff and total part-time staff per week. You can add all that up. But that's the figure they came out. And there was probably, 60 or 70 churches there. And this was the average. So if you have 133 attenders, you'd be in the top 10% in terms of staff frugality, up on the high side. And then on the bottom side, I think we at High Desert now are probably right in that average group. That's where we are when I use that for us at High Desert.
Is attendance adult attendance? Or
yeah, I think it's everything, Billy.
Kids too?
Kids too.
Gotcha.
Yeah, count everything. Yep. Thank you for that question. That's good clarifying. Yeah. Jim?
How do you treat the changing trends in terms of weekly attendance being very different than monthly reach?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's, the average person now, what we read, you guys have probably read the same articles, is 1.6 or 1.7 per month. So the way I look at it is the average person in our churches now go 3 times every 2 months. So we got 2 months, 3 times. That's all we get. I mean, I think that presents challenges communication-wise. discipleship-wise. I was in a meeting recently with Brad Lomenick. I don't know if you know who Brad is. He's the one that started Catalyst, and we were just, there's about 12 pastors shooting the breeze. He was just talking about the whole shift now from, we used to hear 5-10 years ago, everybody would say it's all about the weekend. It's all about the weekend. It's all about the weekend. Now there's this shift, in his opinion, that it's more about engagement and community. And so his whole point is what would it take for us to engage these new people? How can we get them into community? And that might be in small groups. It might be serving in some role. But that is becoming more important than even the weekend service. That's his take. Now, we could debate that and have conversation about it, but that was an interesting thing to hear. So my question back to him was, define for me what engagement means. What does that mean? And so, we're now, we've been streaming to all of our services the last, 8 or 9 years, but we finally have our own online service now, or, it's online, you could watch it every service, and it was fascinating to me in our studies, 84%, this is what I was told, 84% of the people that come to High Desert Church first visit our website.
Yeah, right.
80, and I'm an old geezer, 84%, look at your website before they come to your church.
Yeah, used to be the yellow page.
And then we had last week, yeah, what's that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I never heard of Yellow Pages. But last week we had 500 and some people visiting our online services, either Saturday night or Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Another stat that blew me away, 75% of that 500 did it on their phone, not on their computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they can tell with the digital things, what that's coming in. And that blew me away too. So that means most of these people, and just my own view, is they're watching the service on their phone by themselves.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of what I'm drawing that conclusion from that.
At the gym.
It could be, while they're on the treadmill or something, It just blew me away, when I start really thinking now, what are the implications of those kinds of things, for the next 5 or 10 years. Okay, let's look at the next one on your sheet there. It says, best practices for building into your staff team, how to hold a team accountable to results, individual coaching accountability meetings, how often, annual review, best practices, and annual offsite training, planning retreats, all of those things, building into your team. I'm curious on this one, answering that one for me. I'd like a couple of you to answer that for me, because I'll tell you what we do, but I'm just curious. What are some of the, what do you guys do?
In terms of the
Yeah,
staff
kind of.
recruiting and training?
Yeah.
So we came up with something different a few years ago, and it's been this will be a sales pitch, best thing we've ever done. And, so we were in the habit of going to conferences once or twice a year, and we had great polished speakers and so forth. And about the 4th time, my staff took a picture of me asleep in a chair. And I decided we needed to change our.
They put that up right before your
They did,
next
right on
sermon?
Facebook. That's good. So what we do is every year, we're doing it right now, we're in the process of discussing for the spring. We pick a city within 4 hours of us, and we plan 3 days out there, and we get a Verbo, and we pick 6 churches. And so say it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We go to a church on Wednesday morning, one on Wednesday afternoon, one on Thursday morning, one on Thursday afternoon, Friday. And we meet with their staff, and we interview their staff, we take a tour of the facility, we ask, what did you do, what did you not do, what do you wish you had done, what do you wish you had never done?
Yeah.
And then we have hangout time at night, we cook together and we stay at a nice Verbo somewhere. That has created such a collection of memories and vocabulary that there's nothing that we could have done better to dream about what churches can be. And now every time we're talking about moving into a building right now, we go back to all those, well, remember that one, remember how they did that, remember, like the color of the paint, remember what that church looked like, Yeah, so that's been a really helpful.
And I would think most churches were very hospitable to you and would probably...
They love it, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they find it entertaining and curious.
Yeah, yeah.
So we call it our conference on wheels.
Yeah.
We go to Phoenix, and if you go to Las Vegas, tell your congregation you're in Henderson. So and then we've done San Diego and Santa Barbara.
That's kind of like the La Jolla San Diego thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, good thought though, Jim. That's a good idea. Piggybacking a little bit on what Jim said, that's kind of what we have different things that we do for different things. We give each of our staff members $1,200 for a conference line. And as far as I'm concerned, they can pretty much go anywhere they want, you know, generally, unless they're going to a gun show. But anyway, we do two other things. We have a staff board retreat that all the full-time staff go. And that's more when we're talking about vision. We usually do that in October, and we project what we're going to do the following year. If generally we have our budget, at least first reading of it in that October meeting, kind of show our board where we're going. The rest of the staff see that, so we talk a little bit more on the financial side, but we also talk about the following year. That's a board staff retreat in October. Then we also have a staff wives retreat, or spouses. We do that, you know, the last, I don't know, 15 years we've gone to Dana Point and stayed at the Blue Lantern, which is very expensive, but it's very, very nice. And I'm out of this role. We created a new role because I'm half-time as the exec. George Beards is our chief of staff now. He's in charge of it, so he's probably the last 3 years put a lot more emphasis on the marriage component at that staff wives, pastor wives retreat. I was more inclined to do, I would bring in speakers. We would often meet at Monarch Beach at Ty Guy's church. We did tours. We went to Mariners. We went to Saddleback. We went to San Clemente's first campus for Saddleback. I don't remember all the stuff we did. So mine was a little bit more, kind of what Jim was saying, a little bit more trying to create idea exchange with other churches, just picking up ideas, having those kinds of conversations, and then bringing in speakers. I'd usually have them come in. We'd go on a Monday afternoon, come back on Wednesday. That Tuesday morning, I would have different people come in and be presenters to our team. But that's the staff board, pastor wives thing, and we had the staff board retreat. I felt like those were my mandated things that they did, and they could spend their $1,200 any way they wanted to. You know, some would go to Thrive, you know, some would go to Catalyst, some would do other things with it. That's what we did on the conference side of that. In terms of accountability meetings, I am not big into reviews, you know, pastoral reviews, or you know, what would you call it?
Performance reviews.
Yeah, performance things. We used to very regularly, and I don't know what they're doing now, but before, you know, Tom and I would meet with a staff member once a year and just talk about goals. You know, what are your goals for next year? And we'd know what their goals were for that year. And it was just very conversational. It was not, you know, you're going to have 500 in this or 250, you know, the metrics were off the table. It was just basically what they were trying to achieve. I do think one of my kind of pet peeves is this, and I'll illustrate it this way. I was on a school board for 19 years. I'm very political. I like being involved in my community. You know, I had to run for office. It was a school district of 22,000 kids. We had about 2,000 employees, $150 million budget. There was 5 of us. We were all elected by the, you know, through voting. And I would almost say this, almost every year, we would have teachers that wanted to come and appeal to the board because they were being recommended for what they call non-reelection. In California, you have 2-year, you know, you get 2 years, then you get seniority and get, I'm losing the word, you know, tenured. On that first day you walk into the classroom, on your 3rd year, you're tenured. That's the way it works. But what would happen, we'd be sitting in a meeting, closed session, and a young lady maybe, or a young man would come in and say, I don't understand why I'm not being rehired next year, you know, why I'm non-reelect. And then they would show us their evaluations. And on those evaluations, they would get high grades. And they had to be evaluated, I think, twice a year. So they would have 3 or 4 evaluations after 2 years. And there we are with high evaluations, good performance evaluations, and we're not hiring them back. What the heck? Because their principal was not being honest with them in the process.
Right.
And we're giving them higher scores maybe than they needed or should have got. And so then they get to this point where they think if they rehire this teacher for that third year, they're stuck with that person probably for the rest of their life because the way tenure works. And it almost happened every year. And it really frustrated me because then we, as a board, had to make a decision. Do I support the administrator of the school who doesn't want this teacher back? Or do I think, man, this was crazy. This poor teacher didn't even know that they were not any good.
Not doing well.
Yeah.
Because nobody told them.
That's right.
Right.
So it's not accountability.
Not, yeah, so I mean, it was more administratively, it was our fault more than the teacher's fault. But I say that to you, I've heard this in church work, where people, especially your bean counter CPA type leaders, will not say much to a pastor or a staff member, and then just kind of drop the bomb on them and, back the truck up and just unload on them at one thing, rather than dealing with the things all along. If there was something that wasn't right or somebody wasn't doing what they should have been doing at what level they were required, then why wasn't that brought up rather than waiting for 6 months and then documenting it all at once where we just, go nuts over the things that we didn't like at that point. So that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, and I have heard that. So if you do formal evaluations, keep those kind of constant as time goes along. I was helping one of my friends, just took a church, and I've been there 2.5 years now, and he was working with his elders, and he asked for my help. His elders approached him, and they didn't have a pastor for 2 or 3 years, and they wanted to do evaluations of him. Guess how often? Quarterly. 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 I'm making a big point of that. Not yearly, quarterly. So I met with the 2 elders at a restaurant, and I said, okay, help me to understand what you guys are thinking about. And I said, you guys want quarterly evaluations? And they said, yeah. And I said, help me to understand why, because that to me is the big question there. Well, they had been without a pastor for several years, and the previous administration had been rather abusive to the staff. And so their motivation, honestly, was pure and good. They worried about the team getting abused again by the new administration. And they wanted to catch it ahead. So once I understood their motivation, that was easier for me to have that conversation because it made sense to me. But it didn't make sense when I just heard they wanted to, I'm thinking, they're going to evaluate his sermons, they're going to, do that kind of crazy stuff. Yeah. And so once we talked about it, then we said, okay, then what we're concerned about is church health and staff health. That's the bigger issue. So let's do some stuff yearly that address that issue rather than having a formal interview, sitting down with the pastor and doing this quarterly thing. And that was a solution to it. So you have to know the reason why. But I do think if you have a non-performing staff member, generally when there's something going on, it doesn't get better with time. It just seems to get worse. And so I think we sometimes take the path of least resistance. We'd rather push things off rather than dealing with them when they need to be dealt with. But that's a side point. I'm getting carried away here.
Speaking of the unstuck resources, I don't know if you guys did this as part of it, but one of the things that they have is trying to think through that balance of performance and health. Mm-hmm. And so trying to understand, you've got different staff who work at different speeds, and relationally, what they bring. And so thinking through that, I thought it was interesting going through some of it, just thinking through how some of my staff are, they're high relational.
Yep.
low performance kind of thing, but they're kind of your pastoral people to the staff in some ways, or sort of that way, and you have kind of the opposite. I can be more driven and thoughtful I can be unthoughtful for some of the things. But it was just very interesting to kind of think through some of that stuff. So it's a good resource to check out.
Yeah, yeah.
I can say on the church health side, where we have long-term pastors that have not addressed issues for years. One of the things I did as a transitional pastor, where I was a transitional for 7 different churches in TN, is I would come in and go, oh my gosh, look at all these people that never got addressed, and they should.
Yeah.
We have this tendency to say, it's all about grace and love, not about truth. So we just leave you here. We don't tell you. And so years later, you come in and you go, oh my gosh, look at how much staff we have. There's no reason for all this stuff. Nobody ever wanted to have the tough conversation. So you leave it for the transitional guy, right? But if you're going to do a turnaround, why wait for the turnaround to happen? Why not just turn it around and have the honest conversation that you go?
You're not doing those people any favors, by not being honest. But there is a component to that honesty. You want to operate with grace and truth, both of those principles at the same time. But I think that most of us would lean more on the grace side. You know what I mean? And maybe that's good. I don't know. But I do think, not having that conversation. But the way I feel about that too, Mark, it needs to be ongoing, because it's trust. It's built up between you and that employee. It's relationship, so they know honestly that I have their best interests in mind. I am not just here to, jump on them. I'm really trying to help them be better at what they do. And if they don't sense that, that's when it kind of goes sideways, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead,
So
Ken.
what I'm hearing in that is try not to make it annual. Here's once a year thing.
Yeah.
Make the feedback more regular, consistently.
Yeah.
How do you do that for your church? How do you structure that so that, let's say, senior pastor is doing that with his direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are doing that with their direct reports
Sure.
in the church. That it's not just, well, then we just don't give.
Yeah, first of all, I wouldn't say
Accountability,
not,
what that looks like.
I wouldn't say, hey, Ken,
That's okay.
yeah, I wouldn't say that not to do them yearly. I still think it might be a good thing yearly to have some kind of a conversation, and it might just be goal-driven with 3 or 4 questions, which was conversational. So I wouldn't say not do that. But then again, going back to the ongoing things, I would do that, at least monthly, you know what I mean, having that conversation with a person. I think the harder thing for me wasn't so much me doing it with you, it was getting you
That's what I'm-
to
yeah,
do it
the
to
next
the
layer.
next guy. That was more challenging to me. That was a bigger issue. Because again, some of them, if I was talking to you about him, often you, for whatever reason, didn't want to deal with this issue, for whatever reason that was. Because there's some things that play into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Billy?
I was just going to ask, he's talking about the 360 reviews and all of this, but you said you don't like performance reviews, right?
Not formal ones. That's what I mean. I want them to be conversational, where I can talk about anything that's on my mind or what I'm hearing from the church about whoever we're talking about.
Yeah.
What I'm a little bothered by, I think, would be, you see these real formal forms where you check boxes and do that kind of stuff. That's not our style. That's just not the way we do things. And again, some people are very comfortable with that. I don't particularly like that. I mean, let me tell you guys, I'm on the board at Fellowship Monrovia with Albert. I'm on the board at Forest Home. I've been on a school board. I'm presently on a park and rec board. I've been on ABC, PSW. I've been on a water foundation board. And I'm telling you, I've been to all kinds of evaluation systems that I've seen in my role. And the checkbox things to me is, from my perspective, historically has been kind of bogus.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. So you guys may use it and find it well, but I don't know if it's just because I'm more relational and not more that way, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. But I don't think in our church, our people, our staff doesn't feel accountable. I think they feel accountable, you know, to do what they need to be doing. So, and maybe that's just inherent who we have, if we have good people, and I don't have to worry about that. And I think over the years, and some people might accuse us of being too gracious, you know, we've had to let a couple people go in the last 4 or 5 years, but we can talk about that in a minute when we talk about even how to do that or some ideas. But I think all those things contribute to kind of create a healthy staff culture.
Sorry, just one more thing with this. In your church, I assume that Tom is probably not the one doing the meeting monthly and all that.
Well, we'll talk about staff meetings in a minute and how we did that.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there's a problem staff person that needs some help.
That might vary, Billy, because maybe I'm struggling with somebody, personality or attitude. I might even ask Tom to help me, you know, to step in and, you know, meet with that person or whatever. I honestly think that's individualization, where, you know, we can talk about all of the things we're talking about today, but so much of it is contextual, you know what I mean? And personality. I mean, who's more gifted at that kind of stuff than, you know, I mean, and in a church, you know, that's got, you know, 400 or 500 people, we might not have an exact hatchet man. We might just be you know, you're the senior pastor, you got to do all that stuff. And so I think that weighs into it. Giftedness, you know, attitude, there's so much that plays in it. So I want to use the word kind of individualization because it might take that, you know what I mean? It might be a little different for these guys than it might be for Gateway, you know, it might be different for, you know, Scott's church than you know, Jim's church. I don't know. I just think, but I think we have some general principles, and then I think I want to try to make those fit with who we are as a staff and what our way of operating is, our culture, everything about us. What I think helped me be effective was, I think I have three elements to who I am. One is sincerity, and I think our staff picks that up, or did. George is now there. Second one, I think, would be authenticity, very open and honest. I don't think I hide things. It's pretty much what you see is what you get. You know, we'll talk a little bit about that even when it comes to salaries. And then the third one is somebody that I would say is capable of understanding. So you're in a conversation with somebody, maybe one of your staff members. Do you have the ability to put yourself in their moccasins and in their shoes and hear them and understand that? Those would be the three things that I think helped me over all these years to be effective in what I was doing. Not everybody is that, and that doesn't mean that's bad. It's just you're different. And so, but I think that helped us build a good culture. I think it helped us retain good staff. And, you know, I was going to tell you today, we're in a whole new cycle because a lot of the guys that I brought on our team in the last 15 or 20 years are leaving. I think they're concerned Tom's going to be checking out in 2 or 3 years. Jack's checking out. I think that's part of it. I think that weighs into it. And a lot of them now are getting to be, let's say, 35 to 45, and that is a very pivotal time in the life of a ministry person because they start thinking, and I don't mean it's driven by ego, but they start thinking, what's next for me? What do I want to be? Do I want to be a senior pastor? Do I want to move from youth to a family pastor or something? All of that goes on. You know, I know Ken was like an executive pastor, you know, really, yeah.
I was a youth person.
Yeah, but you kind of moved those steps. And so I think that plays into it. So I was thinking, I was going to say, I was just reflecting last night. One of our guys, our youth pastor, Chris, he's now the pastor of a church in Apple Valley, senior pastor. Jeremy McGarity, with me 9 years, now a senior pastor at Skyline. Todd Arnett, our family pastor, now the senior pastor at Trinity Church in Redlands. Aaron Hoffman up at Crossing, and campus pastor in up by Henderson. Peter Anderson, new senior pastor, First Baptist Hanford. Jeremy Pete, kind of the executive pastor of an EV Free Church up in Pismo. Jake Ellis left our youth, he was our youth worship leader, now is the worship pastor at ABC up in Atascadero. Joel Lingenfelter was our business administrator, was with us for 14 years, wanted my job in a good way, but he knew George was going to get that job when the time came. He left, now he's an executive pastor of the largest evangelical free church in Pennsylvania. His dad was a provost at Biola and provost at Fuller. Joel was, Lingenfelter, and then Steve Wilmert, another one of our worship guys, an exec in another church. I was just going through this. In the last 10 years, we've lost some of the greatest people we've ever had. And they all hit that same thing. They all get that age or something where they want to know what's next. They want to know what hill to climb, what leadership potential they had. And it's not bad. I don't look at that. I mean, I don't think they had nobody. These guys are still our friends. We're all still connected together. And so I just think part of that transition that goes on. And but I think, you know, the difference too, for you as you supervise your team, this sounds backwards maybe, but you have to be just as interested about them as people as you are what they do for you at your church.
Right.
And I think sometimes, and this is a cheap shot, here it comes, some senior pastors, when a man or a woman on your team is struggling with their role and maybe wanting more leadership to go to that next level, and they're talking about leaving, it's like your attitude is not yours, but, you know, don't let the door hit you on the way out. You know, you got 2 weeks, and I think it's crazy that some staff members are afraid to talk to their senior pastors about maybe going to a different role in a different church. That saddens me. That shouldn't be that way. And I just think to myself, you know, I see that, and I would say every one of these guys, we coached. You know, one of our guys had a couple churches he was visiting, looking for a senior pastor role, and I knew some stuff, and that's bad because I'm dangerous with that. And so I kind of coached that guy not to go there, and he didn't go, and he's glad he didn't go. But I was more concerned about him going to a church that I felt was unhealthy, and it wasn't like I was trying to make him stay at our church, but I just didn't want him to go somewhere that was going to be not a good situation. So anyway, that's a side point. Let's keep going. I think we're kind of on that third question. Professional expense account, any wisdom on a range to work within and what to consider when handing them out? For us, we have an expense account, which is $5,000 for Tom, $3,000 for me. We have a book line that's only $200. We have a conference line, which is $1,200. We have...
When you're presenting numbers to your, I don't even know if you present them to the congregation, but
Yeah.
how much of that detail is known beyond the...
just our board. Our board is aware of it. But when we do our, like, I don't know how you guys do, you know, we have a 15-page budget. I mean, it's pretty detailed and everything. But what we present to the church is just by category. So we might have staff costs, you know, I mean, I can't think off the top of my head, or program, or missions, you know, and it would just have the total line there. Now, one thing that I would do, let's say I was in the student ministries budget, for example, and maybe they have $20,000 in their budget, and then they would have maybe 4 or 5 lines in that bill, maybe volunteers, appreciation, or whatever. They'd have a whole list. As long as they did not exceed this $20,000, they could you know, be fine. But I would only ask if they were going to move money from this line to this line. I would just like to know. But you know, it wasn't like they needed my permission or anything like that. But this was the golden thing here. They couldn't exceed that. But they could kind of change these numbers any way they wanted within that budget. But it specifically spells out the subcategories in that group. But when we go to the church, it's only, there'll probably only be maybe 15 line items that they vote on. That's all they're voting on. And then the total down here, you know. Yeah, because it gets too down in the weeds, you know, because then they, you know,
Somebody sees something. And all of a sudden, you're in an hour.
Yeah. One of the things we did probably 25 years ago that really helped us, we have an annual business meeting like you guys do, I'm sure. We actually have a budget forum before the meeting. And so anybody because we would post this is public, it's posted, and if somebody had questions about it, they could come to the budget forum and ask questions about it, not in the regular business meeting. So it was nice to be able, and we'd get at our budget forum, we're a big church, we'd only probably get 8, 12 people in the budget forum, because that's all that, they had, and they were good people, but they just had questions about the way we were spending money. And so we would address those. And it was nice to be able to say, at the business meeting, we could say, those are the kinds of questions we have at the budget forum, So if you want those kind of things, next year, come to that. Don't come to the
business meeting about.
Right. And the business meeting, a good business meeting only lasts probably a half an hour. Because you're voting on your board members, and you're voting on the budget, and that's about it. Yeah, if there's some property acquisition or something like that.
Did you guys ever think differently about the budget in terms of whether you want to call it kind of the growth engines of the church, or the, here's kind of the key mission drivers of our church, and put everything in that? So worship, you have your staff, your budget, your expenses, your programs, whatever, to kind of see and evaluate, hey, we're comfortable with this, and seeing it that way. So when we put staff and staff related, it just kind of says something this way, but sometimes we don't, the way it doesn't, we wouldn't see something as like family ministries. They're like, oh, I only got 10,000 to spend. It's like, yeah, but we have a full-time staff here. Like, we're actually invested $100,000 in our family ministry. Like, we're highly invested in this. You just don't see it in the way that it looks on this paper. Right. I don't know if you ever looked at that, or looked at it through that lens and thought, right out of whack, this isn't we'll never accomplish this part of our vision if this is how low it is. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever looked at it through that lens, you know what I mean? I think the thing that's made it more complicated for us now is the 4 sites.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new ball game, you know what I mean? Because, people see it through, I'm from Hesperia, he's from Phelan, he's from Apple Valley, and he's from Victorville. There's just so much, I don't know what would the word, provincialism or something, that's coming through that, and that gets a lot more complicated, and it's very difficult to deal with. Wait a minute, Ken, I got to read you something. I love this. This is a business meeting out of the book of Acts. Okay, this is in Acts 19. I love reading this at our meetings. Verse 32. Inside, the people were all shouting some one thing and some another. Everything was in confusion. In fact, most of them didn't even know why they were there. Now, I'm sorry, I had to read that.
No, I was just going to say, when we do our budget in terms of even presentation to our people, it's a few lines, but it is grouped. It's kind of like you talked about category. So we have 3 major pieces. We'll have what we call administration, facilities, because people want to see that, and then ministry. And then we do that. And so even when we were refinancing our loan, because of the way we do it, they had a question about, well, where's the senior pastor's salary? We were able to tell them it's in ministry, because we feel he touches ministry for the whole church. And they just wanted to be sure it wasn't a surprise line item later, it's just added. But it was very clear in our people. I think we've been doing that now 8 years, maybe 9, but it made things easier for us.
Yeah, gotcha. And, I would say, too, just as a side point, nobody asked this question, but for our staff, we are in MMBB. That's a missionary benefit board. We are in Kaiser for our whole full-time staff, and then we also have some supplemental vision and dental things here. This is kind of an interesting one, because originally when we got into that, I've been there 35 years, so we never got into MMBB until I think 2001 or 2, somewhere in there. So for the first 18 years, Tom and I were in nothing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so one of the things our church did about 5 years ago for Tom and I was do a kind of a makeup thing, and so they gave Tom and I $30,000 per year for 5 years, and it's in a 457 account. So we can't have that, can't touch it until we leave the church.
Yeah.
But like mine right now has, I think, $158,000 in it, and it's, you know, I don't know what Tom's has because it's self-directed. You know, I'm not too smart. But anyway, so when I leave is when I'm fully separated from the church. This will be added to my MMBB, you know, because we don't have that much in MMB with 15 or 16 years.
And we did the same thing for Pastor Carrington.
Did you?
They
You did that for him, then he died? Is that how it works? No.
We did that when we went into MMBB to make up, they started then. So when he retired in 2012, he got that, and we had carried it on our books for a while. So when you looked at our numbers, because we were carrying it, it was ours, he couldn't touch it, we looked even better financially than we did. But then we had to sign over those accounts accordingly. But
We were probably a little more formal, Ken, than you guys were, because we put this in what they call a 457. And either Tom and I can't... Yeah, well, yeah, and so we can't touch it until we leave, which I think is good, you know, in the sense, and so it's a separate account, it's not part of our general fund. But they did $30,000 a year for 5 years, so that was kind of the makeup provision for the first 17 or 18 years or whatever. Kaiser is for the whole family, you know what I mean? It's not just the employee, you know, some do it for the employee, some do it for the employee plus the employee's spouse, some do it for the whole family. We're into the whole family. So I again, because I'm more of a socialistic communist at heart,
And also
But-
all the talk about the pot.
yeah.
I don't have any problem with them.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, just, you know, trying to do as much as we can for our people. Now, some of our people, we don't, I'm getting carried away on this since nobody asked this question, but I'll let you know. We don't pay Social Security on our pastors. You know what I mean? They have to cover their self-employed, 15.3 for Social Security and all that. So let's say a secretary or a custodian that's full-time, obviously the church pays the 7.65, but that's, in a sense, building their Social Security. So we give them 6% of MMBB.
Wow.
So we'll give them a 6% of their salary goes into retirement. And the way I figured that, honestly, was 6 plus 7.65 is about 13%. And if you're in MMBB at the full thing, 13% goes into retirement, 2% is life insurance and disability, 1% is a benevolence fund, if you're familiar with how that works. But so I felt like my communistic ways was trying to make that kind of equivalent in that sense. And that was my logic. Yeah, well,
So that's for your part-time staff?
no, not part-time.
Oh, that's for full-time, okay.
Full-time staff, but more in the shared services component, not so much the ministry side, but I was thinking like secretaries, custodians that are full-time.
Gotcha. What
Okay.
do you do for the ministerial?
I think, you know, right now, I don't know, because I've been out of it for three or 4 years. But I think it's a difference between a full-time, you know, ordained pastor and this. So I think it's like 10 or 11 or something like that, yeah.
But the full-time pastors, you do the full 13%.
We do a full 16%.
Oh, yeah.
it's 16.
And a part of that, Billy, I'll be honest with you, again, because I'm very paternal, I would encourage some of our younger staff, you know, let's go back 30 years, to do life insurance. Some of them wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it really bothered me, because I felt like, if you die, sucker, I'm responsible for your wife, or our church is, you know what I mean? So the part that I liked was the MMB thing at least gave them, you know, when you're 20s, it's 4 or 5 times your salary, in your 30s, it's 4 times your salary in your 50s, it's 3 times your salary, the life insurance benefit part. And so I felt better about that. To me, again, not to do anything, and just look around, you guys, and Mark knows this. Mark knows this because he's working with some of these baby boomer pastors that are now in their 60s, and they're in churches that are dying because they're 68 or 69 and the congregation, mirrors them, and they've plateaued or dying. But the reason that some of them can't step down is because they can't afford it.
They have no retirement.
They have no retirement.
Social Security years ago.
Right, and
Nothing.
they got nothing.
And then they went to the church and say, aren't you going to take care of me?
Well,
I have these-
but again, Mark, I would say the church was responsible 25 years ago to do something, and it's shared responsibility. They were responsible themselves, but I also think the church had a responsibility in that, and it saddens me. And so, you guys are responsible to me. I would rather see you do some of these things over here than even give them a raise.
Yeah.
Because again, being very paternal, some of your younger guys won't do what they should do, and maybe they don't have the money to do it. But I'd rather put it into their retirement or their health benefits or anything like that that helps them as a family more sometimes than even salary. I'm a very frugal person, and I'm known for being a coupon guy. Yeah, because you go to lunch with me, you're going to get a coupon. But and I usually throw that back at guys and say, he is faithful in much, or faithful in little is faithful in much. But that's just being a jerk about it. But anyway, but I honestly believe that God blesses generosity. And I think if we can, I've talked to a couple churches that had some struggling situations like that, and guys, do this. Let's be generous, and I believe it'll come back to bless you. I really do. And I'm not talking about health, wealth, and prosperity stuff, but I just believe that. Anyway, I'm sorry.
So let me make it more provocative.
Okay.
They'll have to figure this out with me, but I'm guessing some of these guys are dealing with this now. The feeling that it would help the church's mission to transition some folks that have been around for a while off the staff. That where, like, they've come in, the mission of where the church is going, you've inherited people, and you've got to kind of live with this. But these are people that have longevity, there's history, and then you add in the whole heartfelt, like, well, how are they going to make it in retirement, or what's next? Who's going to hire this person at 60 years old or whatever it is? So I've already bought my ice block that they can just push me out and feed me to the polar bear and the circle of life. So, but I think
it's a real question, Bill. Had a worship guy that was very traditional in his worship style, and probably was older, and probably needed to either retire or take a different position in the church rather than leading worship. So what do we do at this point? Because we don't kick this guy to the table and out the door. And because here's the conversation we had was, okay, we can have this guy move on, and seriously, you'll have 150 people leave with him.
That's right.
Now, would you rather have 150 people leave with him and lose that income, or bite the bullet and have another guy and pay that salary for the other service? You understand what I'm saying? Either way, you're losing. You know what I mean? But it might be better for us not to lose that 150, or pick some arbitrary number. We'll lose that amount of people if we let this guy go, because he's 62 or 4 or 5 or whatever, and he's living in the past. How's that? And you know what I mean? Or go with the younger guy. And my feeling is I'd rather have 2 guys, not lose those 150 people, and pay that extra second salary. Now, you can argue with me on that one, but that's the way I would have done it.
I have a staff member that's been with us, and I consider different, and is approaching 70.
Yeah.
And we started the conversation last year.
Good.
And have announced to the church that by the end of this year, this is our transition. And I've been able to say, before people start staking claims on positions and thinking this is what I'm gonna do, that we'll start a formal search in May, June, and I put out there, that's when seminarians are looking to go, so now they hear what I'm looking for. So you can't say, oh, well, so-and-so would be a good idea. He's gonna do a full search, he's looking for somebody with a degree, so that I can be able to chart the vision for where I wanna go in terms of just people think, oh, this person in the church would be good, and they're having these outside conversations, and show that we're shifting, and now we've done that before. Now let's do a more traditional route, or that will secure the church for us.
Does he know you're announcing it, or you're just announcing it?
Oh, no, we announced
I'm just
it.
kidding.
No, I didn't announce at the church. It's she. I didn't announce at the church, but we did have a conversation. We met, this is what my plan was. And then they actually sent out an email to all of the people that they work with and told them ahead of time. Only problem I had with that is I wish they had told me before they sent out the email. It was a little, I would have timed my email.
Yeah.
In terms of
The way
24
I would
hours
say,
before.
Ken, on those things, you work back from that date. You lay out a calendar of all the things. I will give you a quick thought on it's kind of like, when I think about the search and stuff, I look at it almost like a rock in a pond. There's this, this inner circle, that first layer out there. When I'm doing a search, I want to use all of my relational network, yours and mine, all of that, and that's just more word of mouth. That's the first thing I do, and I would do that for a period of time, that first ripple, if I can say that, because again, you know and I know the best people you're going to get on your team are probably people that are referred to you from somebody you trust and know. The next one is probably, that next wave out would be, posting it on the website, going to Christian colleges maybe, or seminaries, or going to, maybe churchstaffing.com. There's 2 or 3 like that, chemistry staffing on, line. And then if I get nothing there, I go out, and that's probably when I would consider engaging a search firm. Now there's Slingshot, Vanderblumen, Faith Search, Agura, Chemistry Staffing. There's probably 10 different firms that do that now. The Dingman Group, the Gainer Group, there's a bunch of them. But that's probably, I wouldn't, just my preference, I wouldn't engage that company first thing. I'd try those other things first, yeah.
Where's kind of the tipping point for you of hiring internally versus externally? Because you talked about chemistry in terms of everything. So you know the chemistry of your people inside.
Yeah.
So where does it become a competence factor of, we don't have anyone internally that could fill this?
That's
Ken.
Ken. But if you can do internal, I'd much rather do internal. I think it'd be great if half your, I don't know, pick some percentage, half your staff were internal, the other half were external. What happens too that we've experienced, as you get bigger, everybody has a spiritual gift. I mean, if we look at 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, Ephesians 4, I believe that those passages, talk about spiritual gifts, but I also have a feeling that each of those spiritual gifts have a capacity or a cap. Okay? So let's say somebody has the gift of administration. They might be able to lead a church of 500 administratively, organizationally, or so forth, but they might not be able to do a church of 2,000. And I think it's even, I'll tell you what, about 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking for a junior high guy for Victorville. And we had 7 different people come in and speak on Tuesday night to our junior high team. And we also had, interviews, meals with the candidates and stuff like that. And none of them were good enough. None of them. Because in our situation, we have about 250 junior high kids. Some of them probably had the ability to organize that. Maybe some had the ability to recruit, 25 to 50 volunteers. Maybe some didn't have the speaking ability to do that. We had one kid that I really fell in love with. I really liked this guy, but he wasn't good enough. So I referred him to another friend down the street here that was looking for a junior high guy, and he's got 50 or 60 in his junior high program. The guy is kicking butt. He's doing a good job. And because his capacity was not this, you know what I mean? And he had a kind of a range of ability and giftedness that he could do 50 or 60, and maybe someday he'll have 100, I don't know. The next one, you guys, is sabbaticals. And we do not have sabbaticals, but take this and pass it around. I wanted to hear which ones of you do, and I wanted you to see this. So you have 3 or 4 examples there. If that's something you want to pursue, I wanted to give you that information. And then I wanted to hear from you, how many of you have that kind of some semblance of a sabbatical? Now let me give you my biased opinion. I think if people are living a balanced life, I am not sure it's as necessary as it might be in some cultures or situations. Now, I'm not speaking against you guys that do sabbaticals. If I were a senior pastor, I think what I would like to do is take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks off every summer. That's probably what I would do. I might not be gone that whole time, but I might have, 4 or 5 of my staff or my friends come in and preach for me to give me a break. Yeah. I believe that. So I don't know if you want to call that a sabbatical or just a break. That's my take on that. And I think your board would buy it if you really told them that's what you'd like to do. Now, you might be there. If you took 6 weeks off, maybe of those 6 weeks, you might be there 2 or 3 weeks. You might be on stage to pray and host or whatever. But I do think you need that. I don't call that a formal sabbatical, but these are formal sabbatical policies that you can look at and see. Now, let me hear from you. Does anybody have a formal? We don't have a formal sabbatical thing at High Desert. We give, another thing I forgot to put up there, we give everybody a study week. Doesn't count as vacation. Doesn't count, sick leave or anything like that. They get a week off for study. And it's pretty loose. They can go and be up at Forest Home or Thousand Pines for the week and take their Bible and some books and just read if they want. You are eligible to save this up to 3 weeks. But that's not a sabbatical either in the purest form. So tell me, James, go ahead.
Yeah, just clarity on, so the 6 to 8 weeks that you're referring to,
Yeah.
take a break.
Yes.
That's not vacation, or?
It's not vacation.
So you're there, but you're just relieving.
Yep, not preaching, you're not preaching, maybe you're...
Preaching's the primary thing you're relieving.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, even that, you're gone, you can be gone, but it doesn't count as vacation. I would still give you your 3 or 4 weeks of vacation in addition to that break.
Right.
So in a way, in the purest sense, you might count it as vacation, but it's not that. I mean, you might take your family to camp for a week and speak, or you might, be here for the weekends for those 3 or 4 weeks. But I don't want you to feel like you got the burden of the thing on your shoulders. Right. Tom, right now, you guys at our place, I think he's doing 32 weekends out of the 52. And so some of it will be, 4 or 5 weeks in a row, but sometimes it's just once a month to give yourself a break. And we're a team teaching church because I think that's the way of the future. And I think that adds to the preservation of you and your life and your family, your wife, and everything else. Yeah, Billy?
It just seems like, you say you don't do sabbatical, but the 6 to 8 weeks sounds like a mini sabbatical every single year.
That's what I'm saying. It's not formal. We don't have a formal sabbatical policy. Okay. Now, where I'm on boards at different places, we actually formalize that. We want to give you 6 weeks off in the summer with no responsibilities.
Like, I've never taken time off like that, and I've wondered, do you get out of rhythm? Like, there's a certain rhythm of preaching and things. It seems like to be out of it for a couple months would feel weird.
But again, that's kind of going back to knowing your own balance. I mean, if you're living a balanced life, from my perspective, I don't think a 3-month sabbatical is that needed every 7 years or something. Right. That makes me think, I don't know, maybe that's all of us are different. But I think if I had 3 weeks off and I were in your shoes in the summer that wasn't vacation, because on vacation, I don't want you to do anything with the church. But if I have you 3 weeks off or 4 weeks off, I want you to maybe lay out your preaching series for the next year. I want you to do something, and benefit us, We start with 3. If you're here for 2 years, you get 4. And that's what we're at, 4 right now. But we also have at age 55, guess who put this in? If you have 20 years of service, you get a 5th week. Okay? And so that was selfish. And so that's kind of interesting. 8's an interesting one. That's the most I've heard. Yeah.
Doesn't take it, but.
Yeah, no, that's another thing, because that's another thing, we make them take it, and you can't carry it over. If you don't use it this year, you can't use it next year. Because, again, the whole point of that is for them to be revitalized, refreshed, and renewed by going on vacation, you know what I mean? But, you know.
Are there rules for how it's broken up?
No, but I think it's what these guys said, you know, you'd like to know what they're doing. I mean, just say, hey, when are you going to go? And I'll show you some other stuff in a minute here.
Like, can you break it up into 2 days here and 3 days
Yeah,
there? Is it
yeah.
only week chunks?
Yeah, we do. We let them do that.
We only allow 50% of it to be broken up into
Yeah,
small.
and that's probably a reasonable amount, James.
Because we want them
yeah.
to be away and
A
get
break,
away for
a real
2
break.
weeks.
Yeah.
Chunk, because it takes you time to.
To decompress.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've just gotten to where I realize I need to be gone 2 weeks straight. I'd be a week,
You
then
know,
come back.
Ken, for me, it's 10 days. If I get away if I go for 1 week, I don't feel refreshed or renewed or whatever. And then 2 weeks is plenty. But about 10 days, that 10, 11, 12, 13th day, I'm ready to go back. Yeah, you know, I've
I
learned
had
that.
a general rule in the business world I use, and I don't know if you like it here, but when you're in your 20s, you need 2 weeks. In your 30s, you need 3. Hey, when you get to your 70s, you need 7 weeks.
Well, what about I need 9?
I didn't have many 90-year-olds. Yeah, it was all fresh. But it's an easy way to remember it, and it actually kind of works out.
Team org structure, direct reports, how to empower, you know, that whole thing. And I'll comment on that. But this is something we've done the last few years. There's no way you guys can afford to do this. But we do this. This is the thing that we pass out at our staff board retreat in October that I told you about. But we break it down. Each person that we have on our staff team gives you there's an org chart on different pages. Somebody asked me, the question here was, team org structure, I have a lot of direct reports, when and how to empower someone else above the rest, play second role fiddle. I'll talk about that. I believe you have been with the High Desert for many years. How did you play or partially play executive pastor role when the church was smaller? Who did you take on in direct reports and what continued? Okay, so let me talk about that a little bit, give you a little history.
Great. Did George do this, or you do this, Jack?
It's our comm department.
Oh, okay.
No, but I don't get credit. I don't think neither does George. So, but I'm sure he worked with our comm department, Mark, to do that. But you can see, and it's just a good view, and letting everybody know who's doing
Well, a
well.
larger church especially, you gotta have
Yeah.
the structure. has to be
Yeah,
known.
so I thought you guys would like to see that.
Very nice.
And you can see mine. How many direct reports do I have now?
0.
That's right.
Except for the 12 around this room.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, whatever. Let's go back, and I can't remember the numbers, but I will kind of ballpark it for you. This is my opinion. Again, don't shoot me for this. But I think when a church probably gets around 700 or maybe even 700, 800, maybe 600, it's time to think about hiring an executive pastor or a senior associate that helps with the oversight of the staff. That's just kind of a rule of thumb. I don't want to die on that hill. But about that number, it seems like that's when that starts to occur. And I think I used to tell people around 1,000, but because everything is so much more complicated now, because of social media, so much, it just is so different than 10, 15, 20 years ago. But anyway, when we started out, let's just tell you, like when I came, I think we were 160 or something like that at High Desert. Probably when we were, I'm just guessing, around 600 to 800, that's when I became the executive pastor. When I came to our church originally, I took the title of education pastor because I came from an administrator of a Christian school. I'd had an education background. That was very logical. And so when I got 600, 800, when we got about maybe 2,500, I had, I think, 14 or 16 direct reports, which is really stupid. But I mean, we are stupid. But anyway, what we did is we created a new thing called MAPS. And the MAPS stood for Managing Associate Pastors. And so I had 3. I had Todd, Kurt, and George. And so I went from about 14 reports, or 16, whatever it was, to 3 direct reports. I divided the church up into those 3 groups. Todd he almost became like our family pastor. He was responsible for everything from birth through college. All the staff that were involved in that. George was everything from HR, facility, finance, more I would call the administrative side. And then whatever's left over, Kurt. He had the worship guys. He had, I don't even remember, whatever was left. He was in that group. So those 3 were I think you asked this question, James, those were my 3 reports. Those guys became, and I think it was around maybe 2000 that we did that, because your staff, if the Lord allows you to grow over a period of time, probably every 3 or 4 years, there needs to be some reorganization, some change. And, and it might change from church to church. Based on, and a lot of it has to do with even the giftedness of these men and women that you have working for you. And sometimes you structure your staff based on their personality, their gifts, rather than maybe some perfect profile that you could read in a book.
When you get to about that, when we got to about this side, we had to start thinking differently about our structures.
Where are you guys, about 800 or 900?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is wise, and what I hear, because you were in this range, you know what I mean? But I do think whoever you bring alongside of you as your partner, these guys, you don't have the opportunity any longer to go you're always thinking wide. But sometimes when there's problems and difficulties, Tom needed somebody to go deep.
Yeah.
You got to go deep. And when I had these 3 guys, if there was something being messed up in the preschool department, I did not have the time to go deep. This guy had to go deep. You know what I mean? So at what point do I decide that Tom didn't have the ability, or not ability, the time to go into problems at a deeper level, and that's why I was there. And so I had to think big up here. I'd have the big 30,000 foot level stuff, but I needed to have enough ability, skills, and time to go down and fix a problem, whatever that problem was. And I think, honestly, Bill, I think it happens in here. I'm just pick some number, 800. I think that you, most likely, a lot of senior pastors don't have the ability, and I don't want to keep saying ability, time to go down and fix that.
It's capacity.
It's capacity. That's a better word. Thank you.
That 800 number is attendance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just picking, and again, it's a little bit arbitrary, but I'm just saying at some point here, that senior leader doesn't have the capacity, time to do it.
And what happens is most churches in that area plateau, because you don't have the capacity.
Yeah, you're right.
We
And
talked
that
about some of
affects
that, and
other
we work
things.
together.
Yeah.
So if you can get that to the deep and wide,
Yeah.
that makes sense for that
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah.
you'll shoot past that.
Right, and so
Otherwise, you stay
even when
stuck.
I got to this point, Mark,
Yeah.
I couldn't do deep.
Oh, absolutely.
I had to always think wide, so that's always what I was telling these 3 guys about. You got to help me with, we got a problem in the preschool department. You got to fix it. I can't.
Right.
And isn't that the place where the systems are developed
Yes.
the more?
Yeah.
I think so. Scott?
Where would you, this is where I am,
Yeah.
is, we're not at 600, we're at 250, 300 people.
Right.
I'm everything.
You are.
I'm the lawyer, I'm the accountant, I
You're
have
the
all the
CEO,
stuff.
the chief everything officer.
And
You
I'm
want
that.
C-suite.
So, what is most important over youth and kids, any other kind of ministry role? Where would you hire?
I would say, Scott, one thing that I would want, it's almost like you have to take all of those things and divide them up, and which things do you want to be involved in, and which things do you not want to be involved in. And so I would, again, hire to my weakness, or the thing, I don't even say weakness, I would just say things that I don't want to be involved in. But let's just say, so you may, in a sense, I'm going to make you the executive pastor. You're going to take all the ministry stuff, and this other guy's going to be our administrator. But he might be also our youth pastor. I don't know. Now, let me just show you something that you guys will laugh at. Our Apple Valley campus, our lead campus pastor, we're running 1,400 in Apple Valley. That's what we run in our Apple Valley campus. The lead is our worship pastor.
The lead pastor?
Our campus pastor in Apple Valley is our worship pastor. Phelan, our youth pastor is the worship leader. Hesperia, our worship leader was the youth pastor. We just switched him. He was both worship and youth pastor. He is worship and youth pastor, lead pastor, and so forth. The only one that doesn't have a bifurcated portfolio is our campus pastor in Victorville. Because they're like, let's say 4,000 on a weekend. He's no way we can have a guy that's doing that. But I'm just saying to you, this guy here is, if I ask him which would he rather do, be a youth pastor or the worship guy, he'd be a youth pastor. But he does a good job in worship. This guy in Hesperia was doing youth, and Tim Svea was doing both youth and worship. And he didn't want to do youth, so we made him full-time worship / logistics. Now he's responsible, kind of what Ken was talking, everything that goes on Sunday morning is under his purview. So we've always hired, not always, but if we can't, and I know you're kind of looking for the needle in the haystack, Scott, but I would find out in my mind, I would decide what can I handle, what do I want to be involved in, and what do I want to pass off. And if I'm hiring a new person, this administrator, it might be my children's pastor, it might be my youth pastor, it could be my worship pastor. I mean this, Tom Mercer is a good communicator. He's good leadership-wise, organizationally, and he's good relationally, even though he would say himself he's an introvert. So he's good in all those things, but he can't be involved in all those things, so he passes off the things that he doesn't necessarily want to do to Jack, even though he could probably do them better. You know what I mean? So you have to decide that question, I think, is what, I was in a church before I came to High Desert 35 years ago, where I started that church in 1971 or 72, we had 130 people. I left in 1984, we had 150. And the pastor didn't have office hours, we didn't have a secretary, but he preached every Sunday morning, preached Sunday night and Wednesday night. That was his job, preach the word, teach the word, and that was it. And that's why we had 150, 12 years later. But I just say, that was he didn't want to have, I don't know, shepherding component or even the administrative leadership side. So, and then the first person he hired was a clone. So it sounded weird.
I was going to say, how would you work with, like, say in those situations you've got kind of folks in a position, they maybe see themselves doing something else or could do something else. They get to the point where they kind of want to do
Over
something
here?
else.
Yeah.
So I got to the point where I was going to be a 40-year-old youth pastor.
Sure.
And told our senior pastor, like, look, my transition's coming. I'm
Sure.
just giving you the heads up so you don't freak out.
Yeah.
As you walk through all your years dealing with a growing staff and things, how did you walk through that delicate thing of, it's not that this person isn't talented, but where they're wanting to go, I don't know that we're the answer for that. How did you grow with them?
We have that a lot, I don't. What you said was the right thing to say to that guy if he wanted that role, and But again, you don't know where you're going to be 3 years from now.
Right.
And so I would tell that guy, that's not the role for him or you. For me, from my perspective, keep doing what you're doing. Be open to other things, and I don't mean I'm not trying to kick him out the door, but he needs to figure out in his own mind what he thinks the next step is. Maybe he thinks the next step for him is to be the high school guy. You know what I mean? At some point, or maybe the college guy or whatever. We have guys here on these different staff teams that are already having conversations with George about transitions. You know what I mean? Next Tuesday, I'm having a conversation with another church about some kind of a merger. And in my mind, one of these guys might be the guy that I would like to see go over there, but he doesn't even know that. You know what I mean? I haven't even told George that. But I'm just thinking that way, so I'm automatically thinking, not automatically, but my mind goes to different opportunities that maybe certain guys could fit into those. But again, Bill, you got to be honest with the guy. I don't think this is you. We have a job right now for a campus pastor in Victorville. One of the guys asked me about it, and I said, just my opinion, I don't think that's you. Now what you need to do is go talk to the lead here, find out what he really wants, and see if that's something you feel like you can match, but I don't think so.
Well, you're taking a break. One of the things for the smaller churches too, Scott, especially for you, is our church health team. I know George looks like he's going to be joining our team. He hasn't given me the...
George is he told me that. George is on our board now.
Yeah.
I know, you got 6
Hey,
hours.
good to meet you, Lance. We'll talk.
Everybody up there said hi.
Is we're adding on executive pastor types onto our church health team on purpose. So actually, well, that's funny, when I got here, I was calling Jack all the time, I want to be an executive pastor. We don't have any of those here. There's not very many. I'm like, what? So, it's kind of funny, but our church health team acts as executive pastor in a role where we can assist our pastors that can't afford that. Or maybe your folks don't have all the expertise, but they have somebody to call, mentor, and be on the phone to help you with the next hiring decision, to help you with what do you do with compensation, to what are the new rule changes, all that kind of stuff. And we're doing that on purpose because as you grow, you're going to eventually have that inside, but you can't afford it yet.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to have people available for you. The other thing I'd say is we have taken some churches, I won't mention anybody in the room, but and help them with some of the structure, at least for the moment, and interview all their staff, see where they best fit, get another opinion, and then you kind of look at how does that work. And I think that's worked fairly well.
Yeah, we had Mark come do it for us, and that was good because we just needed someone from the outside to be able to confirm what we felt. We felt something was off. And just once everyone talked about it, then we could say, okay, we all feel it, we all know it. In fact, it was interesting because we had a staff retreat coming out of it, in the midst of it, and people could say, we have to restructure. Even if that means I lose my job, that's what the church needs.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by that.
Yeah.
So,
That's some good
but I
people
think
there.
it was a lot, it was because we just brought it into the open in a way that, hey, we just feel something's off.
Yeah.
We're having trouble keeping up, like everyone feels burned out. Like,
Yeah.
let's figure out why this is. And
Yeah.
so instead of self-prescribing on WebMD, you actually go to the doctor, and say, what do you think? We run some tests. All right, here's what I found out.
Yeah.
You're burned out because everyone's coming to you, and they're all frustrated because they all come to you.
Yeah.
And you don't give them attention, so.
Well, in a way, we had that. Remember when I put those 3 guys across here? There was a little bit of difficulty because the people that had direct access to me in the past no longer had it. And so there was a period of what I would almost call loss. They felt, they didn't have access to my time, and so that was a problem. But over time, it took care of itself because these are all 3 great guys. George is smarter than I am, he's a better writer than I am, and a better leader. Beardsley, the guy you're working with, George. I know he's not. He's not as crazy as I am. Yeah, he's not as selfish as I am. This question, you guys, I think we are on which one? Where it says staff best practices, length, rhythm, who is the table, how many elite team. First of all, I want to give you a kind of this. We pass this around for 3 weeks out at every staff meeting at 1:30 on Wednesday, and everybody fills it in. So everybody knows where everybody is. And we have a little code there at the bottom, so you can write in the days that you're off. Nobody can take Wednesdays off because that's when all of our staff meetings are. We have all kinds of meetings on Wednesday. That's kind of the sacred day. But if I wanted to take off Monday, I just put, regular day off. I'd put R in there. You know what I mean? So let's go down and find Jack's name. I can't even find it. It's in alphabetical order, stupid. Okay, there it is. Yeah, so if I was on vacation that week, I would put vacation across there. If I was taking a personal day, I could do that on Wednesdays. Outside ministry, today I have an M down for today. That's what I am. I'm an M. Sick, bereavement, conference, regular day off, out of the office. And here's my kind of the rule on that. Is we have office hours, so man, we're living in the past, I know, People don't like that anymore. But, you know, our office is open at 8, they close at 4:30. Our guys come in usually about 8:15 to 8:30, in that range, because we do something I think no one else does. And I don't mean this in a prideful way. We pray together every day. And so let me explain that to you. And we start the prayer time at 8:45. And if you're working that day in the office, you have to be at that meeting. And the way we break it down is this. On Mondays, we're all together. Everybody comes into a room and we share prayer requests. And some things that are kind of coming up, it's a little bit of a quick 5-minute meeting where, you know, hey, Bill Smith is down at Kaiser Hospital in Fontana. Is anybody going down there this week to see somebody? And it'll come up, usually there's someone else that's going down there. So we kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone by having kind of a, you know, and then we'll share prayer requests. Hey, tomorrow morning, Bill's having surgery, or tomorrow, you know, somebody's going into the courthouse for divorce papers or something. And so we'll share those. And so that happens on Monday. So we all meet in room 209, take prayer requests, and then we break up into groups of 3. So I'll say, hey, Bill, in your office, will you take Billy and Mark? And then you leave. You got all the prayer requests, you go up to somebody's office and pray. But you've been part of that group together. We all start together. Then on Tuesday and Thursday and Friday, we break up into groups. My secretary breaks you up into groups. What this does, honestly, the real priority is prayer. I don't want to deny that. But it has some side benefits. It breaks down silos because we don't have all the Apple Valley guys praying together. All of it. We're mixed. We're all mixed together. We don't have all the youth guys together. We don't have all the worship guys together. Might be a worship guy with a youth guy with a shepherding guy, because we mix them up. And it breaks down those kind of independent groupings. And it's the same way for the sites. And then on Wednesday, we have the same group. So I pray with the same guys every Wednesday. I have a comm guy in my group this 6 months. We do it by semesters. I had a different group last time. We started in January. I have a comm guy, I have a shepherding guy, and I have a youth guy from one of the campuses. Us 4 meet for prayer every Wednesday morning at 8:45. And so we have a little bit of both, or a little bit of everything. Have the big group on Monday, same group on Wednesday, and then we break on the other 3 days.
The other 3 days are they random?
My secretary just picks them at random, mixes them up. And one of the things in our situation, Billy, we have some people with offices and some people with cubes. Yeah. So she has to make sure whoever, there's an office in one of the 3, that they can pray in. And then, you know, and she knows by looking at this one, who's on vacation that day or who's out that day or so forth. So they wouldn't be put in a prayer group on Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday because they're not in. So anyway. The question was staff meetings, best practice, linked rhythm, who's at table, how many lead the team table. I wanted to give you that because I think that relates to schedules and who's there when and so forth. You know, kind of gives you an idea. And I'll be honest with you, I don't want to over-exaggerate that, but I don't think there's anything better you can do for your staff team than praying together. If you don't pray together now, I would just challenge you, even if it's 1 day a week. We're all going to come at 8:30 on 1 day during the week, and we're going to pray together. You know what I mean? This is kind of our staff meeting a couple years ago when I was leading it more than it is now, so it's a little different now. But somebody asked a question about how we do our staff meetings.
And how long would you schedule them?
Usually it'd go from about, you know, prayer would get over about 9:15, 9:30. We'd start this room about 9:30 and go till lunchtime, basic 2.5 hours each time we'd meet. And that was very effective for us. I don't know how you guys do it, but that was kind of the way we did it. And it seemed to work for us. And it was kind of a golden day, because in the afternoons, often, because we'd break by lunch, the afternoons were meetings often that were by job groups. Maybe the youth guys would meet in the afternoon on Wednesdays, or the worship guys or whatever. So it was kind of broke. They would make their own schedules. But that's the way we did it. I think another thing that would be, you know, we did it down at Skyline last couple weeks, I like stories. And so we got, 30 people around the table, and I'm sitting next to Jeremy McGarity. And Jeremy, is leading, and then we cut a new, most likely our exec down there, Josh, over here. And we wanted to hear stories. Who did you meet this weekend? What are stories from this weekend? And it's just encouraging, somebody had a kid in junior high pray to receive Christ. That was shared. Then we had some people say, well, some people came back to the church that left a year ago, told that story. It was just good.
You just start with that?
Yeah, we start with that. It was very uplifting, very encouraging, and it's just more of a share time about that, even before you get into the business and the calendar. So I like that.
Yeah, we use the first part of our all-staff meeting as
Share time.
wins and how do
Yeah.
you see the hand of
That's
God.
what-
And
that's what-
it's great because it gives you a more 360 view of the whole church, because there's just things you would never see or experience
Yeah.
if you all live in your kind of
That's so
worlds.
perfect, Bill. I just think that's great. I mean, I'd encourage all of you to do that. in
That
your
wasn't
meeting.
my idea, I was just business.
Yeah.
I was just,
Get to
someone
it.
else on the staff said, hey, what if you, and I was like, all right, you're right. And
Yeah.
now it's my favorite part of the whole thing, because I like,
Yeah.
man, I never would have heard that.
Yeah, one of the things Jeremy implemented at Skyline that we did at our church, and so did the guys at Trinity, we make everybody that's full-time, not the custodian secretaries, write a board report. So once a month, they write a report. Usually it's only half a page, 4 or 5 paragraphs. And that whole packet of 35 or 40 reports goes to our board, our administrative board. They get to read those reports. We send them out on a Friday. The board meets a week from that weekend, and they see it's such a bigger scope of what they don't even see what goes on. And it's really encouraging to them that every one of them would say, thank God, because they would read what the youth pastor wrote in Apple Valley. They went to Hume Lake for a winter camp, had 7 kids pray to receive Christ, all kinds of stuff like that. It just is good. And that would be something, Jeremy down there at Skyline, I think they're doing it quarterly. We do it monthly, but I just think it would be good for your board. And then it's good for the other staff members to read it too, because they can see what's going on in other departments that they might not normally hear about.
Sorry, what do you do monthly? I missed it. What do you do monthly?
Board reports.
Board.
Yeah, where they would write it, Billy. They would write,
Writes like a one-page.
they would write 3 or 4 paragraphs about what's going on in their ministry. And that's shared with everybody on the staff in a written form and to the board. It goes to the board with the agenda for the next board meeting. And I think that, and it also, for me, it takes me, honestly, probably half an hour to read everybody's report. But I want to know what's going on. And I can comment to the guys when I see them in the hallway, hey, I heard your, Jumpstart went really good last Wednesday. And it just is really good body stuff, And they know that you kind of care about what's going on because they're sharing, they've poured their life into the junior high group, and then you are fat, dumb, and happy. You don't even know what happened. But you read that in the report, it makes you aware of what's going on. And I like being aware of what's going on, just to know. And it's probably pretty encouraging, too, for them to know that, the rest of us know what they're doing and what they're involved in. And, they gave away, like the Victorville campus gave away, I think, like 20,000 books or something like that to the local public school district. We just did that a couple weekends ago. And I don't think the rest of the staff even knew what they were doing, But it was good for them to hear that. Yeah.
How many of the board and staff do you think read the whole report?
I think the board reads the whole thing.
Yeah.
I would say all of them do. The staff, I'd maybe guess half. So it's kind of a joke, too, because they have to have it in by a certain time. So George, now at our staff meeting, when all the staff's together, if you don't have it in by that same time, we have what they call the Hall of Shame. And for you haven't done your report by that time, you get called out in the public meeting for not having it done. So, but it's kind of become a joke now. But everybody does it.
And it's restricted.
Tom does it, Jack does it, everybody. And it's good for them to read what Tom's doing, By the way, on the thing we were talking about, schedule, about 4 or 5 years ago, our board, we gave a request to our board to give Tom a month off to do non-HDC ministry stuff. So when he's out doing his oikos stuff, that doesn't count against his vacation.
Can I ask a question that, sorry, it wasn't on here, but I just think staff culture is so, so important.
It is.
And from everything I've heard from you guys have done that really well at
Yeah.
HCC.
I think we have, Ken.
And so some of these things are staff culture building tools that you guys have done.
Right.
So I've just picked up different pieces of that, but can you just speak any more to that of intentional things that have been like pillars
Yeah.
of staff culture?
Yeah, I could give them all to you, but I think, were you there when I spoke at,
Dana Point? No?
at Dana Point?
Yes.
Do you remember what I went over? You guys were asleep?
I got notes on it. Yeah, his staff.
I have a tattoo of it, I just. It's private.
He wasn't there, but he was asleep.
Yeah. About, when you talk about staff culture, I think it's something you don't intentionally, let's try to create something. I think it's just identifying who you are, kind of with hindsight. You know, who are we? What are we like? What are our values? And about, I don't
But
know.
then if you're not intentional about that, you'll lose that.
That's right.
Yeah.
20 years ago or more, I wanted to be able to identify who are we as a group of men and women. And each one of these letters stands for a very simple word, and this is his staff. I use this as the umbrella, overarching thing, even when we were hiring somebody. Do they have these kinds of characteristics? I don't necessarily think they're all exhaustive. I mean, you could probably come up with some more. But humor is probably number one for us. I think that if you don't have a sense of humor, you probably will not last long at High Desert Church. It borders on ridicule. You know what I mean? So you got to be careful. But I mean, it's there because, again, you guys, when you guys have all been in tough meetings, it could be a board meeting or a stressful conference or whatever. If somebody can inject something light and funny, it lightens the load and it just brings the conversation down. And so you need to have people that think that way and are that way, that are just fun, maybe self-deprecating people. You know, it's interesting to me when you take the word humor, its cousin is humility. They go together. And you guys all know Tom pretty well. Tom's a fun guy and he's got humility. Humor, informality is another one. We could talk hours on these, but it's basically what's our culture like, you know. This is not as big a deal as it used to be, Ken, but, you know, when Tom and I started 30, 35 years ago, you had to have a coat and a tie on stage. You know, you dressed, you know, and now it's so different. And even titles, you know what I mean? It's not the Reverend Dr. Kurt Thielen. You know, we got guys that did their D-Mins and stuff, you know. I don't want to call you Dr. Primo. I want to call you Pastor Ken. You know what I mean? That's an informality thing. It's not diminishing your work and effort or anyway, but it's just that idea. You know, we want to be informal in our letters and our communication, our dress, and I think that's more important really for us maybe because we live in the desert. You know, than maybe some other churches and different than La Jolla.
We need to wear a suit, but with flip-flops.
I think the other one's a servant heart. We get one of my buddies, your buddies too, no names mentioned, had a youth pastor, and he was in the San Diego area. That'll give you a clue. And they had an event one night at their rec center, and they were responsible to put all the chairs away after this event. So the staff, 3 or 4 of them, are putting chairs away, volunteers are putting away, and one pastor says to the other pastor, hey, help put the chairs away. And then the youth pastor says, that's not my job, I'm the youth pastor.
Yeah.
Did I just hear that right?
Yeah.
You know, he only lasted 2 more months.
Oh, wow.
Another cultural thing, Kent, for me is simplicity. You know, and it's just that KISS formula, you know, keep it simple, stupid, as best you can. And I've always appreciated Saddleback, because I really like, Rick's simple. You know what I mean? I don't mean simplistic, but simple. And I think he has the ability to take things and kind of put the cookies on the bottom shelf. And, you know, even their 101, 201, 301, that's simple. You know what I mean? It's not complicated to me. That's a big thing. Why? Why would that be? Could there be some bumps?
Yeah.
Yep. Big deal. Just being real. You know, we talked about millennials and all that stuff, but gosh darn it, just be who you are. What you see is what you get, you know. I would hope that when your staff sees you at work on tomorrow, that you're no different there than you'd be at home. Maybe at home you'd be more stressed, but depends on yeah. Flexible, change, adjusting to change. Some people just can't do that. It's very difficult for them to adopt, and so I think one of the key things, Ken, when you ask about culture, I think that's a big one for us, And then the last one is faithfulness, not to God, not that I don't mean not, but to one another. And what I mean by that, you guys, is that's Matthew 18. And honestly, I'm a really strong proponent of that. If I'm having a problem with Ken, let's say Ken's having a problem with Bill, and he comes whining to me about it. What's the first thing I should tell him?
You should talk to Bill.
Dang right. And we don't do that sometimes. And so that's a big deal to me. Because what that does to me, it builds loyalty. Because when somebody comes to me whining about someone else, that other person knows that I'm going to send that person back to them. I got a call 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, from an elder at another church. And he had 3 people come to him about a certain staff member. And I said, listen, I'm not even there anymore. But I said, you need to tell those 3 people to go back to that person and talk to them directly. And I'm telling you this, I'm going to talk to you in a month, and if they haven't done that, I'm holding you responsible, because that's your job. And now I said, I also want you to go to your senior pastor and tell him what you told those 3 people. He obviously is going to want to know what those 3 people, who they are. You're not going to tell him, but you're going to tell him you did what the Bible says. You sent them back to their person. But I want him to know that this rumbling's going on. So anyway, trying to work that out, but I'm just saying that's a big one. And I think we need to practice that big time. But anyway, back to your question. That's culture in my mind. And I hope it's healthy. And I think that I don't think you can ever stop practicing these kinds of things, because they go on and on and on. And you'll never get away from it. However you want to identify your own, because you might have your own that are unique to your own ministry, but those are things that are true.
Hey, if I could add just one resource there. We had a guy by the name-
You can't.
Okay.
You asked if you said if you could, and I'm saying.
I've already heard about
Which one was this?
What were you going to say?
Formal. Shut up, just a second here. I want to say something. Jim Powell spoke at our small, what do we call that? Mustard seed last year.
Yeah.
And by the way, he actually just is in our TM church. We just placed him at
What's his
Palm
name?
West Community Church, Jim Powell.
He wasn't the guy in San Clemente that's down there. Well, that was Boat Ride or something like
That
that.
was another guy.
Oh, okay.
Jim wrote a book called Dirt Matters. Best
Dirt Matters?
Dirt Matters.
Wow.
Best book I've ever read on changing or keeping DNA culture inside of a church. And he had some great notes.
Good.
I'm hoping to have him speak at some of our sessions now. He's part of TM coming up.
Good. Another thing I would say, I think we might need to change a little bit of the way we talk about who's at the table. I think some of your younger staff want a seat at the table, even though they might not deserve it. But I think I would start, if I had it to do over, I would include more people in conversations rather than trying to exclude people. Just with the way culture changes right now. I just think younger people want that. And I think even as a good leader, my simplistic view on the leadership thing in a way is, your job, when somebody comes to you and wants to complain to you or share something, your job is to listen to them. And you value what they say, you hear what they say, but you don't necessarily have to do it. They have a right to be heard, but they don't have a right to think you're going to do what they ask you to do. But they feel valued when you listen to them. And that's, remember I was saying those 3 things, that sincerity, authenticity, and capable of understanding. Those are big deals, especially to the younger ones. Office hours were 8 to 4:30. We ask our guys to be there 8:30 to 4:30. But again, if somebody needs to go somewhere, Ken, let's say a high school guy wanted to go to McDonald's and have Cokes with 4 or 5 of the kids, student leaders, praise God, go. All I want is when I go over to their secretary and I want to say, where is Jody? They're going to say, oh, he went over to McDonald's with them. I don't want to hear, I don't know. So, I mean, it's a kind of a fine line. He doesn't have to ask permission, but I want to know where he's at. And again, that's just a little bit of accountability, but not a lot, you know.